Take it away. Jump into Galatians.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So sweet, so special, Bob. Thanks for being here. Galatians chapter 2 today. And just want to say welcome if you're watching online with us. So glad that you are, watching, tuning in today. Trust that you're doing well. Love to see you again in person as soon as possible. Everybody in the room, so glad that you're with us. If you're just joining us, or if you've kind of missed a weekend here or there, we're in a series through the book of Galatians, week 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there. We've been in Galatians for a bit here, and we're starting Galatians chapter 2. It's this letter that Paul was an apostle, and he's a really pretty significant character in the New Testament of the Bible. A lot of what is the New Testament was written by him to collections of churches or individual churches just all over. And so here's what he wrote to the Galatians in chapter 2. And it feels like, when you're driving somewhere and you're on a highway, especially a highway, and you get to a construction spot and they have like concrete dividers on this side of your lane and then cones like right on this side of your lane, and you just like anxiety, like feels like you got to suck it in like as you're driving through. And it's kind of a high stress thing because it feels like if you just like an eighth of an inch that way and it's like big trouble, eighth of an inch that way, and you're in big trouble. So these two really bad potential things happening just right on both sides. But what you do is you navigate your way through that, but it's something that you really get in your head about sometimes. Today's passage feels a little bit like that to me, and so I'm titling the message, Moving Through Ministry Landmines, because I'm going to try to balance a few things where we see a couple potentially bad outcomes on this extreme and on this extreme, on this side and this side. But I think what we see is Paul and Barnabas and Peter and James and John really skillfully and in a spirit-led way navigating their way through those potential landmines as they balance some really important things to balance. Verse 1, then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas, taking Titus along with me. I went up because of a revelation and set before them, though privately before those who seemed influential, the gospel that I proclaim among the Gentiles, in order to make sure I was not running or had not run in vain. But even Titus, who was with me, was not forced to be circumcised, though he was a Greek. Yet because of false brothers secretly brought in, who slipped in to spy out our freedom that we have in Christ Jesus, so that they might bring us into slavery, to them we did not yield in submission even for a moment, so that the truth of the gospel might be preserved for you. And from those who seemed to be influential, what they were makes no difference to me. God shows no partiality. Those, I say, who seemed influential added nothing to me. On the contrary, when they saw that I had been entrusted with the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter had been entrusted with the gospel to the circumcised, for he who worked through Peter for his apostolic ministry to the circumcised also worked through me for mine to the Gentiles. And when James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given to me, they gave the right hand of fellowship to Barnabas and me, that we should go to the Gentiles, and they to the circumcised. Only they asked us to remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do. Okay, first, let's do some context, kind of get our bearings about us. We'll go through a couple ideas, and then we'll end with this last line, remember the poor. So some context, get our bearings about us. What is this? What's happening right now? Remember last week, back to chapter 1, verse 11, Paul's kind of doing this autobiographical thing. He's just saying, hey, churches in Galatia, let me tell you about all this stuff that happened. Let me tell you kind of what I did, how I got here. He's continuing that, basically. And he starts with saying 14 years after. After what? Well, that's after his conversion. So after Paul just had this insane encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, and he gets converted. Now, remember last week, Jeff helped us see, he doesn't get right down to business. He doesn't go right to ministry work. He goes to Arabia. Do you remember how many years? Goes for 3 years, and he does literally God knows what. We don't know. But we can speculate. There was some massive paradigm reshifting in his brain. There were Old Testament scriptures and scrolls that were coming to life maybe before him for the first time in his life. But then after 3 years, he goes back to Damascus, kind of a back to ground zero, moment where that's where he was saved 3 years earlier. And then he goes to visit Peter. Remember that moment? We kind of speculated on that last week. This moment where you have Saul, who was the guy who oversaw people like Stephen getting murdered because of the gospel. And Saul was like, yep, good, let's do that. And then he shows up in the doorway at Peter's house. And just imagine what that interaction was like. So he goes to Peter's house for 15 days and just does team building exercises or who knows? But they come out ministry partners. And then he begins to travel and plant churches for maybe a decade. Realize this, between the second half of Galatians 1 and then Galatians 2, we're summarizing upwards of maybe 2 decades, maybe about 20 years of Paul's life. So to begin chapter 2, he says he goes to Jerusalem. And I think this is the second time Paul will visit Jerusalem as a Christian. Why did he go to Jerusalem? He tells us, I went because of a revelation. And revelation, like of all the religious words, it's up there. Like it's one of the top ones. Well, we can look at the book of Acts to get a little bit of clue. Well, what's the revelation about, when did he go? Because I'm trying to get to the bottom of like, what trip was this? Why? What was he doing there? If you don't realize, a lot of the New Testament is letters from Paul and a couple others to different churches. And these letters, not all of them, but a lot of them, we can plot sort of where they happened and when they happened in the book of Acts. So the book of Acts is like, this is describing what happened more in narrative form. And then the letters are kind of like, here's what he wrote at that time. And here's this issue that was happening and some instruction, some prescription about what to do or not do about it. And you can look back at Acts and see that's about when it happened and that's where it was. So where can we find this? A lot of people think it's in Acts 15. There's this big moment there called the Jerusalem Council where they kind of clarify some really big theological issues. There's some good reasons to think that this is about that, but there's also good reasons to think that it's not. I just would say my best guess is that Galatians 2, this meeting, I think was this situation that barely gets mentioned at the end of Acts chapter 11. Here's why. Here's Acts 11, 27 through 30. Now, in these days, prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch, and one of them, named Agabus, stood up and foretold by the Spirit that there would be a great famine over all the world. This took place in the days of Claudius. So the disciples determined, everyone according to his ability, to send relief to the brothers living in Judea. And they did so, sending it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. So you see Paul here saying, I went because of a revelation. I just feel like there's some dots that connect here. Like, well, I think that was probably Agabus' revelation about this famine that was coming. And then it also gives some really good context to the last line of Galatians 2, 1 through 10. It says, remember the poor. And Paul's like, yeah, that's why we're here, bro. Like, because of the famine, we are here to bring resources to help remember the poor. Is that all helpful? Maybe, maybe not. Do we need? I don't know, but I think it's really interesting context, and it gives some good kind of meat to that last sentence. Remember the poor. Well, yeah, we were eager to do that. Now, I want to focus and suggest a few areas of focus under one umbrella, and the umbrella is the need for extreme focus and unity to move through what I'll call ministry landmines. The need for extreme focus and unity in order to move through ministry landmines. Because as I read through these 10 verses, I see multiple parties of people who maybe are doing things a little different than the others, maybe have some different personalities, maybe some different preferences, some different passions, different ways of doing it, different ways of even going about their mission and their ministry, but they really, really love Jesus, and they really want the same thing, and they really want to be on the same page, but they just recognize that there's a couple potential obstacles, a couple potential landmines here that need to be called out and either just mitigated or eliminated altogether. So I see these missional-focused Christians stepping carefully between these two extremes. Number one, Lone Ranger audacity on one hand, or dictatorial authority on the other hand. Those are my phrases. Don't hold anybody to them. It's Lone Ranger audacity or dictatorial authority. These two potential landmines. Number one, just imagine the Lone Ranger audacity. Imagine, hypothetically, that Paul never goes to check in with the leaders in Jerusalem. Because that's what's happening. If you don't realize, Paul's going to Jerusalem, and while he's there, he's checking in. It's like, hey, am I on the right path? Like, can I get some other eyes on this gospel that I'm taking to the non-Jews? Can you make sure I'm doing the right thing? I'm saying the right stuff. Do you need to add something? Do you need to take something? He's checking in and he's asking for accountability. But imagine that he doesn't. Imagine he just doesn't care. Imagine he's like, well, I got a word from the Lord. I'm a prophet. Like, I'm going to go do my thing. Just total Lone Ranger, full of audacity. Even if some of those pieces are basically true, can you imagine how dangerous that could be? On one hand. But then on the other hand, imagine this. Paul goes to check in. Hey guys, can you check this out? Am I on the right path? Can I get confirmation on this? And then imagine Peter, James, and John. There's nothing actually wrong with the gospel that Paul's preaching, but they say that there's something wrong because it's not their thing. What if it was that? What if it was like the classic kind of like micromanagerial, I'm uncomfortable with some of the liberties you're taking with the Gentiles. I don't know. It feels like maybe this gospel that you're proclaiming isn't really the gospel. Sounds like maybe it needs a little bit more religion or rhythm or ritual to it. Let's supplement back in some stuff. Like, let's take away what you're saying. And they just totally change it. Could you imagine that? So we see two equal risks here, but they're both mitigated when these parties are extremely focused on the gospel and they're extremely unified in their pursuit. A potentially Lone Ranger Paul submitting himself to leadership, and a potentially domineering leadership group submitting their own egos and preferences and passions to the greater priority of advancing the gospel. So what we see here is the balance of freedom and accountability. Those are your blanks there on your notes. We see the balance of freedom and accountability. And that is key, I think, for any good relationship. I think you know that to be true. You see that in marriage. It's this balance between freedom and accountability. You do not want 100% freedom. Nobody really, really does in any relationship. You sign up, you say, I do, and you agree to these firm boundaries of exclusivity. And you say, I am not free to blank, 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 blank. Like there's this now constricted, like firm perimeters that kind of echo the biblical sentiment of God's boundary lines falling in pleasant places for us. Like that's what we want. We want the freedom that comes in the safety of these boundaries and these perimeters. And at the same time, we do want room to flex, want room to be us, to express our personalities and passions and preferences within the context of God's will and our obedience to Him. We want both freedom and accountability. It's true with friendship. It's true in your marriage. It's true parenting your kids. It's just this constant journey of looser and looser structure, more and more freedom, but you never lose that accountability, do you? And I think it's equally true for ministry partnerships. I would argue that space is where the best ministry happens, where there's this constant kind of ever-evolving, sensitive to the moment and season, kind of pushing and pulling, giving and taking, loosening and tightening of this balance between freedom and accountability. And everybody involved is mutually honoring. Everybody's submitting to somebody, and we're all pursuing humility together. Even think about this morning, we have Bob Engel here, and you get to visit with him this morning. We're going to spend more time with him tomorrow as a staff. We're going to spend time with him Tuesday morning and elders just praying and processing, and that's this. Like it's literally happening right now. We've got this ministry partnership who's coming here, and he's like, hey, I need to process some things. I need to get some eyes and ears on this that I trust and love and respect, and we're going to do some work together. And there's this balance between freedom and accountability. Because he comes and he's not a Lone Ranger. And when he comes and hears from us, we're not domineering leadership. Like we're here to support and give him freedom and push him out. It's a beautiful balance. So we see this balance as they send out Paul and Barnabas with this blessing. They see all the ways that God is moving. I don't know if you saw that. It said when they saw, like it was obvious that the same kind of anointing or calling or whatever you want to call it that was on Peter to his ministry to the circumcised, which is that's Jewish people, like that same thing. I have that for the Gentiles. God did the same kind of thing in me and through me to the Gentiles. And they could see it. It's obvious. So verse 9 says this, so they gave the right hand of fellowship to Barnabas and me. They said, yes, you keep going. You do it. Now, number two potential landmines here. On one side, overstating their importance. On the other side, disregarding their influence. So these are both about mistaking influence for importance. On one hand, they could have mistaken influence for importance, and they all, Paul, Barnabas, Peter, James, John, they all could have thought Peter, James, and John were more important, more valuable, more significant than any other Christians in Jerusalem, and even more important than they really are. Like, you have this larger than life-sized perception of these people. That would have been really unhealthy and really long-term unhelpful, wouldn't it? But both Paul and the leaders could have been guilty. Instead, look at Paul's posture toward, look at how he refers to them. In verse 2, he says, I met with those who seemed to be influential. Notice the wording here, the word seemed. Verse 6, those who seemed to be influential. Verse 6 again, those, I say, who seemed influential. Verse 9, James and Cephas and John. Cephas is Peter. James and Cephas and John, who seemed to be pillars. You get this tone from Paul. It's like you can almost hear how little he cares about anybody's place on the org chart, right? Like he just doesn't care. Okay, whoa, big shot Christian leader in Jerusalem. Whoa, super impressed. Can I have your autograph? Like it's just opposite of that. He just doesn't care. And he really doesn't as it pertains to their value or their importance. He even quotes, or references God's heart to it. He says, God shows no partiality, so neither do I. It doesn't make a difference to me. God doesn't care about opinion or appearances or titles on the org chart, like neither will I. But at the same time, he does care to the extent that their influence could advance the gospel in an exponential way. So then we get over to swing the pendulum over here, and there's another landmine here that would mistake influence for importance, and it would disregard the influence that they do have. Not simply recognizing that influence is just a dynamic. Like it doesn't have to be a positive or negative. It's just this neutral, real thing. And that would have been unhelpful and short-sighted as well if you just didn't recognize, yeah, these guys are influential. That's why he says 4 times, they seemed influential. They seem to be pillars. It seems like if you have James and Peter and John behind your thing, it seems like that thing is going to get, pushed down the ladder and it's going to work. So he says so clearly, influence doesn't make you more important. I'm not impressed. I'm not wooed or enchanted by what you've done. But he goes to them for partnership. And he's not wrong to recognize the influence they have and then seek alignment with them. So we see both parties navigate these landmines of either overstating their importance or disregarding their influence altogether. And I would argue what we see is this balance between respect and resolve. And I mean respect not just for the people, but just respect for the dynamic, like respect for the reality. Just being able to say and name, seems like Peter and James and John are influencers. And at the same time, you balance that respect for this resolve. Yeah, but it's not changing what I'm called or convicted to do. Like that's what it seems to be Paul's heart through so many letters. He's like, let's name all the realities. Let's name all the social dynamics that may be at play here, but I'm not like moved off of the mission that I have. I'm not like wooed away from it or enchanted by this thing that I get distracted. Like I'm called to go do this thing, so I'm going to go do this thing. I think that's what we see here. This calling to steward that dynamic without becoming overly enchanted by it. Number 3, lack of strategy or lack of empathy. 2 equally dangerous, opposite side of the lane, potential landmines. On one side, you've got lack of strategy. On the other is lack of empathy. If you look at verse 9, here's where you see some strategy come in. They say that we should go to the Gentiles and they to the circumcised. So 2 potential, that's what did happen. What could have happened is this. They could have all gotten to this point, been like, yeah, this is awesome. You're great. Okay, the gospel checks out, bro. Keep going. Yep, do your thing. And go wherever you want. Do whatever, and we'll go wherever and do whatever, and we'll kind of, regather whenever. Well, we'll see. Like that could have been the thing, not recognizing that, like Paul, you're uniquely gifted and wired and equipped for ministry to Gentiles, to non-Jewish people. And likewise, Peter, James, and John, so deeply rooted in this local Jewish heritage and culture. I mean, you are just so perfectly placed as evangelists to Jewish people. Like that could have been one landmine. Forget the strategy. But together they come to this clarity. So they're not saying, okay, Paul, go anywhere, do anything, go everywhere, do everything. No, you go to Gentiles. You minister to Gentiles. There's here. You go there. Let's figure it out. And it's going to be effective. And it's going to be exponentially impactful. Let's do it. and we'll go to the Jews. I love the strategy. I think a lot of us really love the strategy. A lot of you are pragmatic thinkers, and you like puzzles and Sudokus and such. Not me, but some of you do. But a love for strategy can lead to this last potential landmine, which is the lack of empathy. So Galatians 2:10, they end this interaction. This exchange ends with just this one sentiment. Only they asked us to remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do. So get this. If lack of strategy is a landmine on one side, the other side is that in all of your strategic thinking and tactical planning and assembling the troops, you forget the whole point is to love people with the love of Christ. Just to see in every face you see the image of God before you, the God who saw you in your spiritual poverty and had nothing but grace and mercy and love and compassion for you, to see the face of Jesus in the face in front of you, just as an opportunity, waiting to be loved, waiting to be served. You could have missed that and missed the whole point. It's just so interesting to me that this whole exchange, the whole vibe is, Paul's checking in and they say, yep, you're good to go. Gospel looks great, man. You're preaching the right stuff. You go. Keep on going. You're on point. And it's like as he's leaving, but only remember this. Remember the poor. And Paul's like, yeah, no doubt, for sure. That's the thing they highlight. They could have together focused so much on all these strategic partnerships and finding all these local influencers and landing important handshakes with important people, all in the name of kingdom growth, but completely forgotten about simply loving the poor and serving the poor, and missed the whole point. And so apparently it was necessary to say it, and apparently it was necessary to write it so that we would read it. And so here I think we see the balance of efficiency on one hand and love on the other. We see the balance of efficiency and love. And that just leads me to think, just highlighting on this last kind of balancing act, you could say, I wonder how much we flirt with that same landmine without ever realizing it. Forgetting the poor, basically. Like high efficiency, high strategy, low love, low empathy. Is there ever a time we miss that? And some in the room, as I say that, some people in the room, you feel like you don't have the luxury of forgetting the poor because poverty is a daily reality for you. And I hope this is a place for you. I hope this is a home for you. For many, though, when I say remember the poor versus forget the poor, I'd say the risk is pretty high that a church like ours, in a city like ours, forgets the poor, quote unquote. And I mean that at a programmatic level and at a personal level, like, yeah, the systems, plans of us as a church leadership, but also more so at a personal, individual level, like classify or categorize the poor however you want to, and then ask that group, like, how does ABC feel about you? You know what, to ask at our Bible church, big church in the middle of town, what's your relationship with the people of ABC like? It's very possible, I think, that we could give all of our attention and all of our time to pursuing the influencers of our community and rallying all of the movers and shakers into the mission of ABC until we're just a blob of really successful, homogenous families who just enjoy a lot of influence and prominence in all the corners of our community, and we own all the best companies and the best wineries, and all this stuff is like we're all here together just being successful and just being the same and driving our big SUVs to soccer and doing all the things, and it's nothing, it's all good things. I'm not trying to call anybody out, like that's it. We have a big SUV, guys, and it's hard to park. We all get it. We could do that and have a lot of Bible studies and spend a lot of time together and just keep being super busy all the time. How are you, bro? So busy. How are you? I'm so tired. Oh, me too. Like all the we could keep doing that, and we could forget the poor. We could literally, quote unquote, it's not on our mind. Forget the poor. Just flat out forget. And fail to be the tangible hands and feet of Jesus to our world, which is one of the main reasons this whole thing is a thing. I notice for me, it does not take much effort to think about important people and influential people. who can either serve me or provide opportunities for me or repay me, whatever it is. But I often struggle to remember the poor. I even love the word remember. It reminds me of back in earlier in the book of Exodus, there's this line where Israel is kind of at the end of their rope, and it says that God heard them, he saw them, he knew them, and he remembered. It's just this interesting idea that it's not like Israel as an entity was ever outside of God's memory, like he could forget. It's not like God's forgetting anything, but what's this idea of him like remembering, just holding this thing in his heart and in his mind, recognizing the reality of it, like it can't escape. It's not something you ignore. So I say, remember the poor. It's like that. It's like, what does it mean for this just to be an entity, a reality that's on your mind and on your heart? It's in your prayers. It's in your conscience, like your conscience as you experience reality around you. You recognize like there's poverty in all respects, in all regards. It's a reality. About a month ago, I was invited to speak at this thing. There was a staff for a ministry organization that had a retreat. I was invited to speak for it, which was a blast for me. It's such a fun time. It was an evening session, and then the next morning session, and then there was another evening session, so 3 sessions. And before the last session, it's like a Thursday night or a Wednesday night or something, I had like 4 or 5 hours with no responsibility before that, which was great because I was not prepared for the evening session. So I had to really prepare and sit down. And so I leave the campground where they were having their retreat, and I go down to just one of the greatest coffee shops in California, and I sit there, and the weather is just incredible, like could not be better. And I have one of the best cold brews that you could find anywhere. And I'm sitting there with my laptop and my Bible outside, and it's gorgeous and it's wonderful. And I'm typing this message, just trying to encourage people, these ministry leaders, with the love of God, with their identity as children of God before anything, just really like hammering home just how good God is and how gracious he is. And I'm loving every second of it. And a woman comes up who's obviously homeless. Her name is Sarah. She's about 60 maybe. She reaches out a $5 bill, and she says, "Can you go in and get me a vanilla chai? They won't let me inside." And so I pause and I kind of think for a minute. And I'm telling you this story. It's not about what I did or did not do for Sarah. So postpone your judgment. Just don't forget about it. And also, anytime you even start a story like that, it feels like immediately people are thinking about like, well, here's how to fix homelessness. Well, here's what the politics should be on that. Well, here's what the systemic solution. And it's not that. Like the story's not about that. My experience of it's not about that. Stop it if your mind's going there. Just enjoy a human-to-human story. And so she holds out a $5 bill, and I take stock of everything happening really quick. I'm just like, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, $5 it'll cost me 5 minutes. I go in, I get her a vanilla chai, I bring it back out, and then she goes on her way. But here's what struck me, and here's why I say it. Because as I'm standing in line, just at one of the best coffee shops in the whole world, and part of me is mad because I left my cold brew on the table outside, and I wish I had it with me because I was like, oh man, I forgot it out there. But then I'm also recognizing in my gut right then, the primary emotion that I feel towards Sarah in this moment is annoyance. And I don't know if you've ever been there. Like the primary, if I had one emotion kind of swelling up in my heart, I just thought like, I'm just annoyed at her presence. To say it as that's stuff that you're like not supposed to say probably, but like I was. And I think what struck me in that moment was that I'm just out here sitting at a beautiful coffee shop, enjoying my artisan cold brew with my $1,000 laptop and my, just preparing this message for a room of really important Christian leaders about God's love. And I'm just standing there in line, like so bothered by this human's existence in my day. Literally so bothered that she was just there, just being, just asking for a vanilla chai. Like she shouldn't have a vanilla chai. I don't know. And so then I walk back and I'm like, it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if she has a vanilla chai or not. Like it doesn't, like long term. The problem is so much bigger than that little moment. But then here's the rest of the day. Like I go back and I do the thing that night, I feel really good about the thing. Like I feel like I did a good job. I was happy with the preparation I got done. And then as soon as I get in my car and I've got a long drive home that night, like it just, this deep unsettling in my spirit that had this overwhelming sense of, I think I did really well at like all of these different things today. I did a good job on that this morning. I feel like I worked hard and then I did a good job here. Just got to hang out and have all these good times with all these like influential, important people, and like that's cool. But it seems like the thing that God was most concerned about was probably this 5 minutes with Sarah. Like I think the thing that he probably cared most about that day was maybe the only thing I really botched that day. And so in some ways I feel like I missed the whole thing. Like I just missed the whole point. And for me, prayer sometimes, it feels like I'm like digging for words that are just, they're not there and I can't find the right ones. But then other times it's like I sit down and like the perfect words just are there. Like the Spirit of God is helping intercede and just give me the words to pray. I sit down in my car as soon as I'm driving home and just like verbally out loud by myself in my car, I just said, God, I'm sorry. Help me crave less attention and validation from important and influential people, and help me crave more lessons in love and humility from encounters with people like Sarah, because I know that's what you care most about. And I was just praying that again and again and again. I say that whole story with all of its own little landmines. It's like, oh, what do you think about that? And the reason I say it is just to say like here's a deep sense, a deep feeling of failure in remembering the poor. And then here's some words I was just praying, and they've been really helpful to me. Maybe they'll be helpful to you if you identify with that at all. It was less of a question of what am I doing or not doing for Sarah in this moment? And it was more like, what is God using Sarah to do in me and do for me in this moment? Because we can rush at a story like that, we can rush to argue about the strategy and the systems and the housing and everything, but maybe God just wants to sit with your formation for a minute before you rush to that. That's all I'm saying. When I say remember the poor, maybe God wants to take situations like that and just sit with you for a little bit and say, okay, yeah, but what am I doing in you? Not what will you do for them or what won't you do for them or whatever, but what am I doing in you as I form you? Are your thoughts and actions and words, are they making you more like Jesus in this interaction or less like Jesus? The involuntary emotions that are swelling up in you, are those going to make you less like Jesus or more like Jesus? And then remember that it is what we can do for the world. To remember the poor, I want to ask, what is one thing you can do to remember the poor this week? Maybe it's literally just to pray, like literally just to remember. Just that they would find a place at the front of your mind, in your heart, in your prayers. It would be a daily topic of prayer for you. Maybe it is to meet a physical need or multiple physical needs. Maybe it's moving from a posture of ignoring to a posture of making eye contact and having conversations. What if that was it? What if there were 2,000 some people who called ABC their home and they just made eye contact and had conversations? Maybe it's something a little more abstract, but maybe you fast this week from food in solidarity with those who go without food often. Maybe you work on developing a discipline of simplicity and you buy fewer things that are not necessary and you reallocate those funds to blessing other people, giving it away. Before Paul said anything about it, because I'm not going to prescribe things. I just want you to be asking the question, what's one thing you can do to remember the poor? And I'll just close with this. Before Paul said anything, Jesus said a lot, and he said it more firmly. If you remember back in Matthew chapter 25, we preached through this a couple years ago. And after this teaching chunk in Matthew 25, it moves forward with the narrative of Jesus being arrested and crucified, and then he raises. It's essentially one of the last teaching chunks we have in the book of Matthew. And he lays out this whole case. He says, the Son of Man is going to return. There's going to be this judgment time. He's going to separate all people into these two categories, sheep on his right side, goats on his left side. Spoiler alert, don't be a goat. You want to be a sheep. And so he says all this to the sheep. This is the positive affirmative here. Hey, good job, guys. He says, come, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. And then he lays out all these things that they did for him, apparently, you remember, but they don't think they did it for him. Yeah, you fed me. When I was hungry, you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison. You came to me. And they'll say, when did we do that? And he'll say, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. That's voiced through the positive. And then he voices it through the negative. And I'll close with this. Then he will say to those on his left, to the goats, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, you did not welcome me. I was naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, you did not visit me. And they'll answer him saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? That never happened. Then he'll answer them saying, truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And we're left with this convicting challenge that in every face you see, on all places on the socioeconomic spectrum, you would see the face of Jesus, who saw you in your spiritual poverty and had nothing but grace and empathy and compassion on you. And he's there in front of you, waiting to be served and loved. Because he's working in you, he's working on you, and he wants to work through you to impact your world. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word today. Thanks for the text that kind of bounces here and goes there and says this and says that. And we're just trying to follow it faithfully where it leads. We're trying to ebb and flow as it ebbs and flows, trying to highlight what needs to be highlighted. And Lord, I pray that we'd continue to be faithful doing that. Holy Spirit, I pray that you would be connecting dots that need to be connected for people. Go from this moment, Spirit, and bring truth to bear fruit in people's lives. If there are things said that were really unhelpful and inapplicable, Lord, cause them to forget. If there are things that need to be dug into and pondered on and prayed through, Lord, would you bring those to front of mind? For all of us, God, would we be a church and a people that remembers the poor, that do not live lives of privileged avoidance to the reality of poverty, but we remember, we know. On every face we see, may we see the image of God representing you, waiting to be glorified and worshiped through our love, through our service. Lord, continue to make us a church, and especially today, make us a church that becomes a more loving people, that becomes a more humble people. People are so hungry to become like Jesus. May we worship you now in spirit and in truth, deeply and genuinely. In Jesus' name, amen.